Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, and welcome to another edition of Dudes Talking Metal. This is where we gather together some of the most knowledgeable metal dudes out there on the internet to come here to the Lair and talk all things heavy metal and hard rock with you. And for this episode, we have a special guest, a special dude. We have joining us Dan Lorenzo. Dan is the guitar player for the band Patriarchs in Black, who have released three full-length studio albums, including their latest 2024 release, Visioning. Dan was also the founding member of East Coast metal and thrash band 80's, as well as Nonfiction and Vessel of Light. We are going to be discussing Patriarchs in Black's new album, Visionary, as well as looking back on the East Coast metal scene of the 80's, which Dan was a part of with Hades. So, Dan, thank you so much for joining us here for Dudes Talking Metal at the Lair.
You're very welcome. Happy to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, so tell us about the band you got going on right now, Patriarchs in Black. What's the history of the group, and how would you describe the sound of the band? Because as I was listening to your most recent record, you guys touch on a lot of different styles. So I'm sort of curious how you would describe the sound of the band.
Yeah, if people who don't know metal or whatever, like if I'm traveling and people are like, "Hey, are you in a band?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "What's it like?" I'll be like Sabbath, Zeppelin, sort of like that. But most people consider it a little doomier, I guess, on the doomy side of things. But like you said, on Visioning, we have a blues song with a 70-year-old black singer called "Whiskey on My Mind," the song that I wrote. And we have a guy named Kelly Kamen who's into hip hop. He's from the '90s new metal era. We have DMC from Run DMC on one track on each of our last two albums. So it's pretty diverse, but for most of the songs are kind of doomy, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely hear that influence on it. And I apologize. I think I said visionary when I
Yeah.
said that. So it's
I,
visioning. I said
yeah.
visioning the first time and then visionary the second time. Yeah, I hear it. Now, so who's in the band? Because I don't have a physical copy of it, and I know it's you and a drummer, and you bring in guest vocalists.
Yeah, guest vocalists and guest bass players. So it's Johnny Kelly from Typo Negative and Danzig on drums. He's currently in Quiet Riot, and they play pretty much every weekend, which is one of the main reasons why we haven't done a show yet, but also because we've utilized about maybe 10 different vocalists, going from Mark Sunshine Unita, Carla Gell from Corrosion of Conformity Blind, Rob from Blackwater Rising, Dewey Bragg from Bill Ward and Kill Devil Hill. Lots and lots of different singers and even more bass players on every album.
That's
That's
awesome.
impressive.
It's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, I really liked Before I Go and Low Price. Those had that. I'm a big doom metal fan, as
Right.
most of us here are. So I really like the heavy doom sound on that, and the guitar sound especially. I don't know if you can give away your secret of what your
Again,
guitar
again,
sound is, because it sounds amazing on the record.
it's
It's
so
very
so
heavy.
very difficult. It's a Gibson Les Paul custom, right? With the DiMarzio pickup plugged into whatever amplifier my engineer has. And I'm being serious. Like for the last 20 years, whatever the engineer has, it's like I've never worked on my guitar sound. It's like plug in to the closest amplifier and play. I know most people in Doom like to use the orange amplifiers, and that's cool and all, but I don't want to sound like everybody else. So I mean, it's been a mix of Boogie, it's been Marshalls, but lately it's been PV heads. But literally, there's no time spent on getting my guitar sound, because I really believe it's the musician, the way the musician attacks the guitar, the tuning, the riffs, and maybe it's just I'm lucky with my pickup in the Les Paul, which you have to replace when you get a brand new Les Paul for $3,000-4,000. You got to replace the pickup, which is the weirdest thing ever, but. If you guys, anybody here plays Les Pauls, you can't go play live with a stock Les Paul. You'll feed back for the next, 3 days, and not good feedback, bad feedback.
Yeah, it definitely sounds great. I also really liked the Whiskey on My Mind. That had, that could be maybe one of the heaviest ZZ Top songs. If ZZ Top did that song, it'd be their heaviest song. So when I heard
Yeah.
that, I heard some Billy Gibbons
And
in there.
funny you
It's
mentioned
really
that,
cool.
because just last night I had the same singer, this guy named Frankie Diaz, a 70-year-old African American man. and he came in last night to sing a blues song for the next record. Johnny and I actually have 15 or 16 songs recorded, guitars and drums for the
Wow.
next album.
Wowza.
But nobody's going to hear that until July of next year. And I really wish it was sooner, but the record label said we can't really put out more than one album a year. So what we're going to do is we're going to release a little EP, a cover EP in January on Brutal Planet, just a couple cover songs for fun. Because I've never written this much, guys. It's so weird. I mean, like, I remember writing Resisting Success and having no songs left over before Hades, If at First You Don't Succeed, and, struggling to come up with 8 songs. And my bass player wrote a ninth song. And I don't know why, man, but it just gets easier and easier. I guess because technology gets easier. And, I'm just super inspired lately, honestly.
That's
So
awesome.
Dan, you're a veteran. You've been in the business now since the late 70s.
Yeah.
Had a lot of different bands. I mean, you've seen a lot of clubs, you've seen a lot of stages. At this point in your career, how far do you want to go? At this point, are you just into it just to make music with friends, just
Yeah.
to, purge your soul of all the music you have inside of you? Or is this an attempt to get back out there, large audiences, get overseas,
No, I'm
big label?
realistic. I mean, I would love to do a festival with Patriarchs in Black, particularly overseas. But, I have a full-time job. I'm happily married. I'm turning 62 in 3 months or so. So, I have no illusions of becoming a rock star. But like at the same time, while I'm doing my work, every time I get a minute, I'm like, man, why isn't Patriarchs in Black Visioning more popular? It's such a great record. And, everybody wants a little this much more with their musical career, I think, or for a lot of things in life. But I'm realistic. I know it's not going to happen. Nothing big is going to happen, but I'm having so much fun doing it. And there's no money. Like, the label gives us money, but then I take that money and buy t-shirts and, I just promote it as much as I can.
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
do you think you will play live shows with the band at some point in the future or?
I hope so, but the only thing that would make sense would be a festival because we'd want to do it with at least 3 or 4 different singers. And like I said,
Mhm.
Johnny Kelly plays in Quiet Riot every weekend. So I mean, the more records we sell, I guess the higher percentage chance of that happening is. So we'll hope for the best.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
it seems like one of those things that you have such a diversity of voices on here. It'd be really hard to find like
Yeah.
one guy who can do what do Carl and Jason Master
Right.
and
Right. Yeah.
and all the other voices, whatever you have going on. I mean, it's a really diverse set of records
You're right, Butch. Yeah,
musically.
that's why we wouldn't want to do it with just one singer. It wouldn't be fair to me, to the audience, or to the band, or the whole concept of what the band is. We need at least a few vocalists doing it.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I was curious. I was going to say, I was curious when you're writing these songs, do you have a certain vocalist in mind since you've worked with so many different people now? Do you say, hey, I'm going to write this one? Like maybe I want to get like Kyle Thomas to sing this
Yeah.
one or
You read
something.
my mind, Tony.
yeah. Good question.
You know what? No, because I never like to think when I write. Like I've had people say to me, "Hey, why don't you try and write a song like off the first Hades album?" And it would be, you could do something that would be so forced and so bad and so generic and contrived and not cool. So I just write whatever pops into my head, or when I mess around on guitar, something pops up. And then after I record it, I'm like, I could hear, like you said, Kyle Thomas, who I forgot to mention from Exorder and Trouble. He sings on the song Empty Cup on the record. Yeah, so I kind of think of the vocalists after the fact, who would be best suited for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's awesome. Okay. Well, I'm going to be leaving links in the description down below for everybody out there so you can check out the new album and get more information on the band. But let's jump back in time. So Hades was that your first band, your first big band? So tell us about the early days of Hades. How did that band come together? You're from New Jersey. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier in the episode. And Hades was formed in New Jersey. So how did the band form? What was the scene like on the East Coast back then at that time?
So I started playing guitar in March of 1978, but 2 months previous to that, I started calling myself Dan from Hades when I learned about Hades in my English Greek mythology class. And we started playing out like right away, just cover songs, whatever songs we could figure out at the time, we would play out. But we became I'll say a real band in 1982 when our original vocalist, my best friend Paul Smith, was our singer. And I was just telling my wife the other day, we were driving home from Connecticut, and I think Running Free came on or Killers or something. And I just remember like how well Hades did like Iron Maiden, like the album would come out, we'd figure it out, we'd have rehearsal, and like the first time we did the song, it sounded pretty much just like whatever song we were covering. So we were, doing a lot of Judas Priest back then, and that's when we opened up for Twisted Sister in 1982 at the Soap Factory.
Wow.
And so I don't know, do you guys ever hear of TT Quick? Mark
Oh, yeah.
Cavillo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
So we did a lot of shows with them after we were on the first Megaforce compilation CD, Born to Metalize.
Yeah, I was going to show that.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's actually Blitz's
Young.
girlfriend, Tony. Go back to that horrible cover. Blitz's girlfriend, her parents did that cover. I just found out recently.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kidding.
So, the cover scene was, you guys were talking about like, what was it like, man? You could pack a club, like you could go see Twisted Sister or White Tiger or some other band on a Tuesday night, and it would be a line around the block, before they raised the drinking age from 18 to 21. Those bands, not me really, but those bands made a living and a good living playing cover songs. And then they raised the drinking age from 18 to 21 in Jersey, and that pretty much killed the scene. I mean, at least for the cover scene and for how big it was. It took a huge step backwards, which was maybe a little bit better because at that time I was getting into doing the originals, and it really wouldn't have worked in the scene the way it was set up right then for, primarily for cover bands.
Yeah, and back then, Twisted Sister, if you read Dee Snider's biography, he talks about how they were a massive, like they played covers and some wasn't until Dee came into the band when they started doing more originals, but he was like, they were playing like 6 nights a week. He talks about them selling out some amusement park in like the New Jersey, New York area. That's how like massively popular that they were. So yeah,
they would sell out everywhere they would play. I mean, everywhere. And I don't know. Well, he was actually, I mean, he still is a good singer, but he was a great singer. Like I remember Twisted Sister doing a medley of the first side of Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell, doing Lady Evil and the song Heaven. And like, Dee is like nailing the vocals. It was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did Hades then? So how did Hades get started? When did you get signed? Were you playing all around the tri-state area, or were you focused in just sort of on the New Jersey area? Did you go into New York and
sure. Yeah, we went into New York, and then my dad died in 1982, and I think I moved out in 1983, and that version of Hades fell apart, and that's when I drafted Scott LePage and Alan and Jimmy Shulman around that time. And that's when we were playing New York and New Jersey area, and we got signed to Torrid Records. And the appeal of Torrid Records was they put out the first Exodus album, which just exploded.
Yeah.
But they also had a band down by you guys. Oh man,
Tension.
Tension, is that what you said? Yeah.
Tension.
Right. Yeah. So actually, I remember sleeping at Tension's house probably in 1987. They were good guys, man. We played Baltimore with them. But so Hades got a record deal back in 86, and Resisting Success came out in 1987. Then we released If at First in 1988. And then we broke up after our first European tour in 1989, back when it was East Germany and West Germany. We toured Europe, and we just did not get along. We were fighting the whole time, pretty much. There was like divisions in the band. And sadly, it broke up. But that's when I started Nonfiction, and I was really a lot more in love with Nonfiction than Hades, honestly.
I saw Nonfiction. I saw them in Raleigh. You guys played Raleigh once. I came to see you.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, and you saw Carl Agel sing Snowblind with us, half of Snowblind, right after he got booted from COC, which was really fun. It was a good show. I remember a good crowd. We Snookers. I think we played there a couple times, Tony, and then
Snookers.
We do well down there, like in Charlotte and Cape Fear, whatever the real name of that town, I forget.
Fayetteville. Yeah.
What is it called?
Fayetteville.
Oh,
Fayetteville.
okay, Fayetteville. I was thinking it was
Oh,
Winston-Salem. Yeah, that
oh,
whole
maybe
area.
Wilmington. Maybe Wilmington. Maybe you played the
Wilmington,
Mad.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mad
we
Monk.
played all
Mad
those
Monk.
towns. We
Yeah.
loved North Carolina, man. We had a lot of fun down there. We did well down there.
The nonfiction I loved. I loved Preface. I thought that was really good, and that came to me just out of the blue. I was doing a zine at the time, and I'm not sure if it was whoever was doing your promo or maybe somebody in the band, but it ended up in my mailbox, and I read the bio, and the bio was interesting. Dropping, the names Black Sabbath. I think maybe Soundgarden was thrown in there a little bit. So I checked it out, and I just thought it was great. Really, really heavy. It was probably heavier than I expected it to be. So it really leaned into that Sabbathy, almost kind of sludgy sound. So I really dug it. But it was only an EP, left me wanting more. Then a short time later, In the Know came out, and I think that I still listen to that. It's a fantastic album. You
Thank you.
guys had a video. But of course, you had Alan Tecchio from 80's in nonfiction. But you guys had a video. I think seemed like things were kind of brewing,
Yeah,
bubbling up,
it did,
and
right?
then yeah, right, yeah. And I was all about it. I thought, man, this band's going to be huge. This is like right on time. Soundgarden were just sort of like climbing up the ladder, and you guys seemed like you were just maybe a few rungs behind that. And I was really surprised. And all of a sudden, it was like, what happened to nonfiction?
That's a
I'm
good question,
kind of
man.
disappointed.
I remember, so Preface was actually a full album. It was a demo tape. It was
Oh,
nine
okay.
songs though. And they flew Alan and I out to Los Angeles, and we were getting wined and dined by people who wanted to do the In the Know record. And I mean, it really felt like things were about to happen for a little bit there. And then there was this local radio station called WSOU that, I mean, we were number one, like not for a week or 2 weeks or a month, but like months and months on end. And, back then, I literally had no extra money. I didn't eat food every day. And I could play like, if my rent was due, August 1st, I would make sure we played a local show July 30th, make sure I covered my rent at least. So it was really fun. It was really good. And yeah, we had a video called Reason to Live that MTV Headbangers Ball played a few times, but it was probably a mistake video because we probably should have done this song In the Know, but that's like, I feel like that might be my only regret of my musical career is that we probably picked the wrong video. And then yeah, MTV Europe was actually even playing the My Way video. So yeah, it did seem like for a little bit things were good. And then we played a lot of shows headlining all across like probably at least 20 states at least. And then we did an opening tour with Overkill in America, and then they flew us to Europe. It was Overkill, Savatage. Sometimes they flip flop, and Savatage would headline and nonfiction opening. But as soon as we came home from the European tour in '93 with nonfiction, it just seemed like our time was. It just seemed like things were going backwards, and I was struggling financially. I got a job, and I knew once I got a job, I couldn't commit 100% to the music. I fell in love with my wife, who was, my girlfriend at the time. And I knew in my heart that I couldn't give the effort that I was giving all those years previous to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. What about then Vessel of Light? So that then followed nonfiction or?
Sort of. So you guys didn't mention, maybe Tony remembers this. I did a record with Bobby Blitz called The Cursed Room Full of
Curse,
Sin
yeah.
in
Yeah, I do remember
2007.
that. Now that you mentioned it.
Yeah, nobody
Yeah.
can find it. You can't find it anywhere. I'm hoping we'll get it re-released someday, but Blitz doesn't come cheap. So that came out in 2007 and nobody cared. And I was so pissed off. I'm like, fuck it, man. I didn't play guitar for much after that. And I was just playing a lot of basketball. And for 10 years, I didn't even try and write a song. Occasionally, I would write a couple things, but it just had no meaning to me anymore. I was really happy with my life. And then I was flying to Austin, Texas, and my wife and I are straight, but we like stoner rock. And one of us Googled stoner rock from Austin, and we came up with this band called Ancient Wisdom. And I watched one of their songs called The Opposition, and I became like obsessed with this song. And then I watched another song called Deathlike, and I'm like, oh my, this band is so happening. And I found out they toured as openers for Ghost's first ever American tour. They were not easy to find though. When I finally tracked down the singer, Nathan Opposition, and just said, hey man, I want to put you in this magazine I write for. Just wanted to say I'm a big fan. And he had really not much going on at that time. The band had recorded a record, but they couldn't find a label. You know, things weren't going well for Ancient Wisdom. And one day he sent me an email like, hey, what's going on with our band? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what do you mean our band? And I'm like, what are you saying? And he said, like, so he was basically like, I kind of secretly wanted to start a band with him, but I didn't want to ask him because I didn't want to be embarrassed and have him say no. And so he eventually asked me, you want to do a project together? So I drove out to Cleveland a couple times, and very quickly we got a little record deal with Argonaut Records. And then we ended up doing 4 records in 3 years, and I had so much fun with that, and it got me re-inspired to get back into this, you know?
That's awesome. As somebody who, you know, with 80's, you were the mid, late 80's, you were doing your thing back then. The music scene has completely changed with the internet and streaming and all that stuff. How do you look at that side of the music industry? Do you think it's gotten worse, or do you see the benefits to streaming and the internet? And, you know, what are the good and the bad things about where music is today compared to where it was in the 80's for you?
Well, one of you, I think it was Darren, saying he got a nonfiction album in the mail or something and he checked it out. And I'm sure all 4 of you guys come across a million bands people want you to check out. And now, because, you know, look at how many albums you have behind you, John. I mean, we've all heard so many things. There's so much out there. And it doesn't probably have the magic it had when we were young and discovering bands, you know, just by happenstance or whatever. It's just really hard to capture people's ears and get them to listen to maybe Patriarchs and Black Visioning. Like, listen to it at least 3 times. Give me that. You know, it's like people don't have the time or the attention span. And I'm as guilty as this as anybody. But I'm sure like all 4 of you guys have different tastes in different bands. And maybe, you know, Darren thinks one band is great and Butch thinks they suck. So you know, next time Darren sends Butch a band to check out, he'd be like, yeah, I'll listen to it a little bit, not so much. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's just
All
so
the
much.
time, man.
What's that?
Happens all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there's just so much out there, and if it doesn't hit you right away, I mean, I think you're probably not really interested in giving it a chance. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's so different. But I mean, I guess the beautiful thing of it is you can record an album or finish a song on Sunday night, and the world can hear it, you know, days later. That's kind of cool. I love the spontaneity of it. And I actually like feel bad. I mean, this sounds funny. I feel bad for a band like Metallica. They're millionaires and I'm, you know, make nothing. But like, because they're so big, they don't get to release an album every year like I do, because it's it has to be a hit. They got to wait years and years. And I can't imagine being James Hetfield and you got other guys in the band who want to write and say, I'm going to get to record like maybe 6 of my songs the world can hear every 3 or 4 years. Like, that wouldn't do it for me. I mean, the money's nice and the fame and the adoration, but like, I'm writing a lot and I want people to hear it right now. And because I'm so underground, I have the leisure or the luck or whatever. I'm allowed to release a record every year because everybody knows it's not going to sell 1,000,000 copies, and it is what it is. It's just a tiny thing. So in that part of it, I mean, I feel bad for Metallica in a way.
Yeah, it's a shame that those bands don't. I've often said, and I understand there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of managers and people and record labels and contracts involved when you're talking about bands like Metallica or Iron Maiden. But I've often said, imagine if Metallica or Iron Maiden or Judas Priest said, you know what, 2025, we're going to release 12 songs in 2025. And they're going to come the first day of each month will be a new song that'll come up on YouTube and on streaming. And at the end of the year, we're going to release it as a double vinyl with even more songs attached. Imagine the excitement if you knew that the first day of every month, there was going to be a new Iron Maiden song for 2025. I mean, everybody would be on the edge of their seats, waiting for it, excited about it. I mean, any band could do this. And like you said, with the technology, where, you know, people can record at home. They can do this now without the expense of maybe what you would have had in the past, especially people like Metallica
Yeah.
or Iron Maiden. I'm sure these guys have nice studios in their houses and stuff like that. So in some ways, I do. Some of the old guard bands, I wish that they would sort of embrace the new technology a little bit more, because you're right. Everybody has, it's like nowadays, it's a very short attention span. And with so much stuff coming at you, if you just release something and yeah, Iron Maiden releases something, everybody's talking about it for a month, and then you got to wait 4 or 5 years for the next
Yeah.
record to come out. And it's crazy to think that back in the 80s, it wasn't uncommon for a band to release maybe 2 studio albums in a year, or they'd have a studio album and 6 months later, a live record. And then 4 months after that, another studio record. I mean,
Did any of you guys like Kiss when they first came out, the first 6 or 7 Kiss records?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Every 6 months, they had a brand new record every 6 months.
Yeah.
And maybe that's because 4 guys were writing. We're like, I feel like I could release 2 or 3 great albums a year. Now, they might only be great in my opinion and a handful of other people's opinions. And a lot of people say, like, why don't you take more time? But yeah, I mean, Kiss used to do it back then. And I don't know if I was inspired by that whole thing, but I mean, I don't see any reason why a great band with talented people can't release 1 great album at least every year.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And they used to do that. I mean, back in the day, it was a cycle. You put an album out in a year and you toured, Yeah.
I forgot to ask you earlier. Sorry. Okay.
A lot of bands would tour. They'd write the album on the road. They get off the road. They go into the studio. They'd record the album, get back out on the road again. I'm sure that's what Kiss did back in those days. I mean, so I was young. I was like 9, 10, 6 months to a year. That seemed like a long time. I was ready. I was ready for rock and roll over after Destroyer came out. But nowadays, like you use the example of Metallica. Metallica waits like 6 years before they put another album out.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes that long for people to catch on to things. And sometimes the record industry isn't what it used to be. I mean, the promotion isn't the same. I don't even know if physical product is even. I mean, I know that it still sells. I know the vinyl's pretty popular. It's nowhere near as popular as it was in the 70s and the 80s. But most people, they get hooked up with music by listening to YouTube, watching YouTube, or they subscribe to Spotify or something like that, and whatever drops, and or sometimes they'll put a playlist together. And I think it's Spotify that will automatically put certain bands that sound like other bands that you pick out, and they'll introduce people to other things. So I mean, the whole model has changed. And John, what you said about, say, if Metallica was to write or put out one song, would you say like once a month or something, and at the end of it put an album together? I think that would be pretty successful, because I think people, like, I think Motley Crue, even they started recording songs with no intention of making an album. They were just recording songs and putting it out there, and people were talking about it. And I think there was probably a way that they could buy it on iTunes or something like that. So but to get back to what you were talking about, Dan, when you said you've got so much music and you don't understand how a band could wait so long to put out an album, you could also use that to your advantage too, probably by just Bandcamp, just uploading things, write a song. The technology is now, you don't have to go into a studio and spend thousands of dollars. You could do things from home and record a song a week and just put it out there and build up a fan base. And I don't know if you're on Bandcamp, but it's a great resource. You could sell your own product on the platform. And so where some things have kind of diminished from the 70s and the 80s, new opportunities have kind of, out of technology, have kind of risen up. So it's sort of like, it's good in one way and it's bad in another. But certainly for somebody who's really like a prolific artist or a prolific band, there's ways to just keep making music and keep it cycling out there and engaging your audience and keeping people interested in watching what you're doing, what you're releasing.
Yeah, and we are on Bandcamp. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dan.
We are on Bandcamp, not the new album, because we don't own the digital rights, but now you just brought me into a whole nother thing that I'm contradicting what I was thinking about before. And I sort of think the music business died when a band like Motley Crue would release an album like Girls, Girls, Girls or whatever, and they have two great songs, or even bands we loved would release an expensive CD and you'd have two or three great songs, one okay. Like I think a lot of bands, they did so many drugs, they weren't capable of releasing 10 great songs a year. Or some bands, need drugs to write. But anyway, I digress. Butch, what were you going to say?
I was just going to ask, going into back to your writing process, are you doing this mostly like at home, or do you get a chance? I know Johnny's out on the road a lot, but do you guys get a chance to get a room together and really like bash it out when you're working on new stuff? Do you find like just doing stuff at home, like you get as much out of it as when you're in the room, like, you know, everything cranked up and you got the drums going? And
yeah, so in the old days, Butch, what 80's would do in nonfiction is we would, rehearse, then go to the recording studio, and me and the drummer would play the song, or maybe all of us would play the song. And you had to, nothing was happening until the drummer finished his take, and then you layer it. Now, since Vessel of Light, Woodshed on, my last 8 records, I've done it like this. And I couldn't have done this, 20, 30 years ago. I write the song and I arrange the song. And this happens, like, say, very regularly. My wife will watch football and the Jets are doing horrible. The Giants are horrible. So I'm upstairs and I'm like, let me play guitar for 10 minutes. I write a song and then I text my engineer, are you available to record tomorrow night? Yep, come in at 6 o'clock. So I literally, the very next day, I go to his studio and I lay out the song to a click track. And for Vessel of Light, Woodshed, I finished the whole album, all the guitars, just to a click track. Then I send it to the drummer. So I'm still doing that same thing where with Vessel of Light, like I said, I would finish the whole album and send it to Nathan and then Ron Lipnicki from Overkill and 80's became the Vessel of Light drummer. But I finish the song, I arrange it, I send it to Johnny. He records his tracks. So now as soon as Johnny records his tracks, the guitar and the drums are done. Sometimes I do the bass as well. And then we hand it to the singer. So it's just like the speed of not having to rehearse. And then some people say, well, you don't have, it's not really like a band. Everybody doesn't get to put in their 2 cents. And that's true. But after, writing, and recording 270 songs in my life, I kind of feel like I know the way I want to arrange at least my songs. So I don't really need to throw off, ideas of other people. And occasionally Johnny will say, let's add one more verse to this or whatever. But pretty much everything I send him, the guitars are finished. Like the guitars that you hear on the albums I do, that was my guitar tracks the second I recorded the song and, to the click track.
Are you leaving it up to Kyle or leaving it up to Jason or Carl to come up with the lyrics and the melodies, or are those things you come up with and you guys maybe send files back and forth and collaborate on it all? Or
yeah, so
like, do you have a clear idea of what you want vocally? Or
like, so Whiskey on My Mind, My Veneration, This Damn War, Sing for the Devil, like those songs, I heard the lyrics and the melody right away. And generally whenever I write a song, I hear a melody. Like Carla Gale's working on a new song for the next record. That's one of my favorite songs ever. And JD from Black Label Society's actually played bass on it. And I hear the melody, I hear the lyrics, but I respect Carla enough to say, I'm like, hey man, do you want to hear my lyrics and melody? And Carl will say, no, let me come up with my own thing. Because sometimes if I write a song, the singer's range isn't right for that, So I always give the singers the opportunity, if they prefer, let them have first dibs at writing their own lyrics and melody. If they want any help, I'm there for them, And then there's a couple of songs like this guy, John Costco. He's busy with his band and he doesn't have the time to really write lyrics and melody. So like last night I was recording lyrics and melody for a song I want him to sing, and he'll sing it pretty much exactly like that,
Gotcha.
So each singer is different.
I meant to ask you earlier, or I meant to bring it up for Patriarchs in Black. You have a video for Before I Go, which I thought was pretty cool. And who did that video for you, or what was the process behind that?
My buddy Jay Bones from Viking Media. Jay Bones has been doing stuff for us for years. He was a big 80's and nonfiction fan, so I've paid him to make videos before it. And he got a job with MTV, I believe, and a couple other bigger companies. Great guy from Queens. But yeah, it's just a lyric video because it's so hard. You know, the bass player, Dave Niebuhr from the band Dog Eat Dog, he lives really close to me. But like I said, Johnny's always traveling. Like right now, Johnny's in New Orleans with the guys from Crowbar and Kenny from Typo Negative. They're working on stuff. So Johnny's hard to get a hold of, but we do have a performance video. I don't know if you guys ever heard, any of you heard of our Led Zeppelin cover of Friends with this woman, Militia Vox, singing, but Led Zeppelin Friends was always one of my favorite songs, and Patriarchs in Black covered that. It's actually a video with us in the video, but even though we weren't all in the same state at the time. But yeah, so to answer your question, Before I Go is with Carla Gell singing, and it's on the album Visioning by Patriarchs in Black, and it's Jay Bones from Viking Digital Music doing the video.
Is he the one that did the 80's documentary?
Yes. Wow, you got a
Yes,
good
that was
memory,
great.
Tony.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, that was fun.
It's been a while since I've seen that, but I did have a Hades question for you as well. So you guys in the late 90's, you did a few, you got back together, did a few albums on Metal Blade, and I saw where it looks like it's Brutal Planet Records has reissued Downside and Save Yourself on vinyl. And they've also have a compilation called the Lost Fox Studio Sessions. So is that just some demos and stuff that you guys had in a certain period? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Most of it, they're called Brutal Planet. In fact, they're putting out the Patriarchs in Black cover CD that should be out in January as a CD only. Brutal Planet released all three of the albums, like you said, the Metal Blade years, we'll call it, and Lost Fox Studio Sessions, which actually has, I believe it has the original version of the cross singing with the singer before Alan was in the band. Tragically, he died over a decade ago, John Calora, but it's a very different version of the cross. And then, we, like I told you guys before this started, I was telling John how like Resisting Success might be my most popular record, but I don't like to listen to it. I mean, to me, it sounds so dated and the sound quality is not so good. So the Lost Fox Studio Sessions was literally a lot of those songs live in the studio. So it's something about it's better. And I wouldn't, if you weren't a Hades fan, I wouldn't tell you to pick up the album. But if you already are familiar with the songs, you might enjoy this version. And it's called Hades, the Lost Fox Studio Sessions on vinyl on Brutal Planet.
Yeah, it's 2 LP set.
Yeah, it's a real, and those guys from Brutal Planet, they do really nice packaging. It's beautiful inside and out.
Where are they?
I'll have to grab that. I love that record, and I saw you guys live in Allentown at the Airport Music Hall. I think I want to say with Overkill and Mean Streak. I think that was the bill that night.
You're exactly.
It was a killer show. I mean, I really enjoy that show, and I still go back to that record a lot. I also loved, a lot of the records you did. I think all your music has been great. The Downside and Damnation, I think, are fantastic.
Thank you.
Especially Damnation of those three later Hades records. I really love that record.
Thank you, man. And you're right, Butch. It was Mean Streak opening and then Overkill headlining.
All right. Well, anybody else have any questions for Dan?
Need to get Butch singing on your next album.
I do want to add
that Butch will do a song. He's a singer, by the way.
Oh, okay. How are you? Okay, cool.
Darren, you had something, or?
Yeah, I saw Hades a couple times. I saw you guys, I think it was 86 or 87, opening for Megadeth at Lemoore.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw Hades again, I think at 88 or 89 with Voivod. And you guys, the first time I saw you with Megadeth, I wasn't really familiar. I'd seen an article in Metal Forces magazine. I guess it was to promote the first album. And, you guys looked interesting. You're from the East Coast. And at that time, I was listening to Anthrax and Overkill and bands like that. So I was aware of Hades. I hadn't yet gotten the album. I saw you at that show at Lemoore, and you guys just had the audience in the palm of your hand. It was like you guys were home there. I mean, it was like definitely you had your following, a lot of confidence for an opening band. Sometimes an opening band could be a little tentative, especially you might consider, Megadeth is kind of a big band, although in 86, not as much, not nearly as much as they are now, but back in those days. But you guys came out with just as much confidence, like you owned the stage. Really impressive. And then probably about the following week, I bought the first album. So, but L'Amour was I just want to say, I'm wearing my L'Amour shirt.
Yeah.
Back in those days, man, it was like, so we were from the suburbs of Philly, but we would drive to Lemoore because it seemed like that was the Mecca. That was the East Coast Mecca. It was almost like the equivalent of like the Rainbow Bar and Grill on the West
Yeah.
Coast, on the East Coast. I mean, so if you're going to a show, say the Crumbsuckers are playing in Carnivore, you'd see members of Anthrax. You'd see Scott Ian standing there. You'd see Bobby Blitz maybe, or who knows who. You know, Billy Milano might be there. So it was really cool. Um, Growing up in and around that time and being so close to Brooklyn and being able to drive there and go to these shows and stuff like that. But it was really kind of a special time. And you know, ever since COVID, a lot of places, a lot of good places in my area have closed down. Um, and that's unfortunate. But back in the 80's, man, it was like every weekend we'd look for a show to go to. We checked the newspapers. We were always like trying to find something to do. And the crowds were good. You know, Saturday night be packed. Friday night, Thursday night. The closer it got to the weekend, you'd have a better crowd. Obviously, you know, earlier in the week, not so much. But it was just a great time. And you guys were right there on the East Coast playing with the bands, part of that scene, which was really awesome. So I just kind of wanted to
Yeah,
say
I
something about
remember that.
the
I
East Coast.
remember opening up for Megadeth, and it was so amazing, just so much fun. And I believe it was a Saturday night right after a snowstorm, possibly. At least one of the times we played with them.
It was December, I think.
Yeah, okay. It was right after a big snowstorm. That was one of the times we played with them. And yeah, you're right. Lemoore was the place. I mean, and we did have confidence, but I remember just being sick to my stomach as the Lemoore, you know, remember what was the Van Halen song? And then the curtain would rise, and it was just like, oh my God, this is, but somehow, yeah, we just crushed it there. I mean, we opened up for a lot of different bands there. Megadeth, Nuclear Assault, Overkill.
Yeah.
And then Darren, the way you're talking where you live, we used to have some great shows at the Empire Rock Room. We opened up for Danzig.
Yeah.
And
I didn't see it at the Empire, but
yeah,
that was a great club in the Philly area for sure.
a
Yeah.
lot of fun. Yeah, not as big and prestigious as Lemoore, but I was just thinking Metal Church. I mean, all the bands. You know, it was like you said, it was so much fun, Lemoore. But I also had my worst night of my musical career at Lemoore. We opened up for Anthrax, and we came out with The Leaders, the first song. Everybody's on it, and it's fucking amazing. And then the middle of the second song, my amplifier blew, and I didn't have a backup. I mean, I didn't have money for food, so I certainly didn't have enough money for a spare head. And for 3 songs, opening up for Anthrax, I pretended I was playing, and I wasn't. There was nothing coming out. And then I had my roadie, Johnny Milnes from Mucky Pup, who were our opening band. It was a band I would manage after that. I had him go downstairs in the dressing room, look for Anthrax. He couldn't find anybody Anthrax to see if we could borrow a head. But we brought my tuning amp upstairs, and I played through the tuning amp at a sold-out Anthrax Hades show at Lemoore for like the last 5 or 6 songs, and it was humiliating to me.
Wow, that's a story.
But you soldiered through. You had to.
Never forget that one.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, we'd like to thank Dan for joining us here today. Make sure you check out Patriarchs in Black and their most recent album, Visioning. I'll leave links to that. Yeah, I got it right. Leave links to that down below in the comments. So thanks again for joining us here, Dan, and we'll see everybody at the next Dudes Talking Metal.